shouldn't have to call roll.
This meeting is being recorded.
What we did in the past is not call roll. So we just note on here who all we have, as long as they show up and they've talked, and then you can we just check the other side to make sure they're not over there. But if you want to, you can. That's fine too. Me and my computer.
No, I think that's fine. I think we're just missing a few people. Brian Kennedy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're here, say something. Wayne Griswold, Russell McHolt, Brian Parr, and Brad Emmerich.
Right, is that two I have missing? Let me make sure there's nobody on the other side. None of them are over there. There's somebody calling in, but I don't know who that is.
Okay.
Okay, well, with that, we'll just go ahead and get started, and we'll just keep an eye out to see if they join us over time. Welcome everybody, yay, to our first IFC hearing for the 2021 codes for Denver. So this is exciting. We are scheduled to go from 2 to 5. We'll take a break somewhere halfway through, 5 to 10 minutes, somewhere around 3:30-ish. I'll make sure I set my alarm for that. We just ask that the committee members have their cameras on when at all possible, so that we're trying to emulate a in-person meeting as much as we can. So having your, you don't have to have them on all the time, but it'd be nice to have them on as much as possible, especially when you're talking. And then just stay muted unless you're talking. What we'll do is also for those attendees that are there, you will not have your cameras on, and you will be muted until such time as you need to speak. And then we'll promote you over to the presenter side where you can turn on your camera and you can talk. So the way that we do that is when we're taking votes, or if you want to speak, then you just raise your hand. So I would like everybody to find where that function is. So there is a little, usually at the bottom of your screen, if you just kind of hover your mouse over the bottom of the black screen, underneath everybody's pictures and all that, you'll find a thing that says like reactions or something that you can click on, and it'll allow you to raise your hand or lower your hand. So if you don't find that, let me know. Right now, I'd kind of like to test that function. I see Michael Smith raising his hand. So if everybody could kind of raise their hand so we can just make sure you found that and that it's working. If you don't know where it is, sometimes if your screen isn't big enough and you're hovering over the bottom, there might be 3 little dots and you have to click on it to get more options. So look there, I'm not seeing Glenn or, oh, Chief, you got it, right? Russell and, oh, well, Chief had it for a second, so we know he knows how to do that. And then let me look on the attendee side. On the attendee side, I only see John, but raising his hand. Is everybody else able? Michael, I see you raising your hand. I just want to make sure that you have the ability to raise your hand and be called upon to speak if you want. So everybody, I'm going to go ahead here and lower all the hands, and then over here. All right, so Eric and John and Kevin and Mark Jelinski, I didn't see where you guys could have raised your hands. I just want to make sure that if time comes and you want to speak, you can. I have disabled chat. If you have to chat, mostly the panelists, if you have to, the panelists can talk to each other and it'll come straight to us. What is disabled is proponents and opponents and committee members being able to talk one-on-one to each other, because we just don't want that, oh, let's talk about this proposal kind of thing. Whatever needs to be said has to be said to everyone. So that has been disabled. So you won't be able to chat. If you send a chat right now, it will go to all of us. So if you're having trouble and you can't raise your hand, or you're having some issues, just type something in the chat and we'll try to deal with that one-on-one. I'm going to unmute Mark just because I want to hear if he is.
Oh, yes, I
Mark,
was able to find the controls. So thank you, Shauna.
Okay, perfect. All right. I just want to make sure.
Appreciate it.
David Hill, can you speak? I think you've asked to unmute. I don't know. Maybe he's just not next to the
You unmuted
phone.
me again, Mark.
Okay. All right. All right, John. Hopefully you guys can.
They have unmuted me.
Mike Smith, perfect. I don't know what is going on with my control panel, but I just want to make sure everybody is able to talk if they need to, since I'm not seeing everybody raise their hand. Well, type something in the chat if you can't find your functions or anything, and then we'll keep going.
Shauna, my chat doesn't work. I'm just a observer, not a panelist, but my chat does not work.
Okay, but you're able to raise your hand and speak if we need to, so that's cool. So we're good there. Yeah, I don't think the attendees can maybe type in chat. So all right, all of the attendees have been made to where they can talk, is they just have to unmute themselves. So all right, there's that housekeeping. All right, so a couple other things. We'll have somebody taking notes, and so we need to make sure that when we're speaking, we identify who we're representing. Oh, Brad, welcome. Brad is here. No, that we were taking roll, sorry. And we want to make sure that you are telling us, because some of these proposals are staff proposals or public proposals or whatever. So we just want to know, when you testify, no matter who you are, let us know if you are representing yourself, if you're representing the city of Denver, if you're representing your company, who are you representing on each proposal, because it might change from proposal to proposal. So be sure when you are set to speak that you identify yourself for the record. We will have a timer. So here's how this is going to work. We're going to follow Robert's Rule of Order. So what will happen is, on each proposal, I will call it to the floor. And so we'll call the first proposal to the floor. I'll identify which proposal it is and who the proponent is. That proponent will get a chance, not really a time limit, but we'd like to not get crazy about it, to just present your proposal, why you think that this needs to be an amendment to Denver's building code or fire code, excuse me. And so the proponent will present. Once the proponent is done, then we will go straight to the public. We're going to ask the public, and you will have 2 minutes. You see this timer here? You will have 2 minutes to testify if you are in support, and we'll go through anybody that's in support from the public. Then you will go through 2 minutes of opposition. So anybody that's in opposition will have a chance to talk. Then once the first round of support and opposition is over, we'll go to the committee. Committee, at that time, you will have the opportunity to ask questions of the proponent, ask questions of anybody that just talked, and state any concerns, any of your feelings about the proposal of record, and get out as much as you can. If you think there needs to be a modification, come up. We're not going to make any motions at this point, but what we'd like to do is get it on record, like, I like this proposal, but maybe I would feel better if we had a modification or whatever. Get that on the table. Or maybe we want to table it. We don't want to table it. I'm telling you, fire code has way too many proposals to be tabling them to a later date, okay? So that is the absolute last straw that we will pull from. We really want to try to handle these as we go. But let us know as we go in that committee section, because then it will go back to the public. The proponent will get a chance to rebut, and anybody from the public will get a chance to rebut in support and in opposition. They'll have each 1 minute. And then it will come back, once all of that rebuttal is over, it will come back to the committee for a motion, further discussion, and a vote. Right? So the proponent will present, we'll go to the committee or we'll go to the public. Then it'll come back to the committee. Now, committee at that time, if you ask a question of the proponent, we'll let him answer it right then. And then you can ask your next question and he can answer it right then. You don't have to we don't want the proponent have to keep a list of questions that he has to come back and answer in 1 minute. So you'll have a chance to get those questions out and have that conversation. You don't have a time limit, but we are going to try to keep this to really concise testimony. Then we'll go back to the public for rebuttal. Then we'll come back for a motion and a vote. So any questions on that process as we go? Everybody can see the timer on my screen here, hopefully.
Donna, I just want to add with the number of proposals for the fire code, the goal is to get through 13 today on this meeting so that we can keep up. So that is a lot.
Okay, that is a lot. We know that in the past we've had a lot of conversations and stuff, and we haven't really kept it to a strict time limit and strict Robert's rules. So we're going to do that this time. If we see that it's taking too long, we will put time limits on the committee as well. All right, let me see if there's anything else that I need to explain to you. I will have a Word version of the proposal so that if you start modifying it or make recommendations to modifications, I can make them right there. We can see what it looks like. I have a copy of the code book here if we need to go to that to see something. I have Denver's amendments, your baseline for the fire code here. So if we need to look at that. So anything we need to bounce around in, I have it all here. If we need to look in the fire code, there's your baseline amendments. We have all kinds of things at our disposal. So just let me know if you need some clarification or you need to look at something. All right. Last thing, let's see. If you're the proponent, it was decided that if you're the proponent and you're also on the committee, you are allowed to vote on your own proposals, right? So you will present, then you will be able to participate in the voting on that proposal as well. All right, I think that's pretty much it, and I'd like to get us started unless anybody has any questions. Real quick, one last thing before we get started. I just don't think that it's appropriate to move one step further without paying recognition to a dear friend of all of ours who has been involved in this process with the city and county of Denver for longer than probably almost all of us. Well, maybe a couple of you have dealt with them, but I just want to recognize the loss of our friend Masood Sabuchi, who was involved in this process forever and was always my go-to historian. Like, Masood, how did this amendment ever make it into this version of the code? And he could tell me all the way back to who knows when, right? And involved on almost every level. And I remember last year when we were getting ready to write the code, Masood said, I don't know if I'll make it on a committee. Will you let me be on your team? Because Mozingo Code Group was running the hearings. I said, absolutely, you're on my team. But then he made it on a committee. So he was all good. But he didn't care. He just wanted to be involved in the process. So I would just, Tony or Stephen or anybody have anything they wanted to say about Masood, now would be a great time.
I'll jump in real quick. One of the kind of fond memories I have, and even when I'm going through these code items, I hear his voice telling me, Steve, so in the accent we all knew so well, basically telling me I was full of crap or I was wrong, and then would proceed to read chapter and verse exactly what was the intent of the code. And also he'd call me sometimes and go, I remember when we did this in 1992 or 94 or whenever it was, that wasn't the intent. Do you remember the same? And we would concur. So I echo, Shauna, your fond memories. I miss him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Tony?
and absolutely, Shauna, he was on 7 code cycles spanning 28 years. So, we'll definitely miss his leadership. And Steve, I'm sure every time he told you were full of crap, he did it in a nice way.
Yeah, I was gonna accentuate
Very politely.
that. He was a master at letting people know that they were maybe incorrect, but somehow making them a part of the solution.
Yeah.
Very good at that.
Oh, excellent. Thank you guys all. I just wanted to pay tribute to Mr. Sabucci. All right, we better get started here. With that, I'm going to call to the floor item number 51, which is, and I'm going to butcher some names today, so bear with me. John Wojciech, this is your proposal, and I believe you are an attendee, so I am going to promote you to panelists so that you can show your microphone or show your picture and talk to us. So John. I saw him there for a second.
Yeah, as soon as I switched, it bounced me out, so I had to rejoin.
Okay.
So
Sorry.
hello,
Okay.
thank you.
Hello. All right, John, you want to give us present your proposal to us, please?
Sure. So this is a modification to the Appendix B section of the IFC talking about Fireflow. And the specific text is to state that where buildings are constructed as townhouses in accordance with the International Residential Code, each separate townhouse unit shall be considered a Fireflow calculation area, with Fireflow determined by the or for the largest unit, and with an exception for townhouses constructed in accordance with the International Building Code. And the reason for this is actually codifying a process that DFD has been using for quite some time. In essence, the townhouses and the IRC are separated by, for all intents and purposes, fire barriers. So they don't quite meet the intent of or the definition of a fire flow calculation area in Appendix B of the IRC. And yet DFD has been using this concept of a single unit on fire as the amount of water that we're looking to provide for fire flow. It provides a kind of an easier hurdle to cross for these, and I guess has seemed to be fairly reasonable in terms of the amount of water we need when one of these townhouses is on fire. So in essence, what we're doing here is codifying what's been used as institutional knowledge to make sure that it's clear, but we're also separating the townhouses constructed under the IBC from those with the IRC.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So one other thing I want to mention to you, we have with us today a subject matter expert that we have. So if there's any questions or concerns and we need some clarification, or if he sees something that jumps out of him as a problem or an inconsistency or something, Glenn Mathewson is with us today from buildingcodecollege.com. He's here as a subject matter expert for all of our IFC hearings. So I just wanted to make sure that you know that he's here. And Glenn, if you at any such time need to jump in, let me know. All right. At this time, I'm going to go I'm going to go to the public and ask if there is any testimony in support of this proposal. If you want to testify in support of this proposal, please raise your hand. Testimony in support of this proposal, please raise your hand. or unmute yourself if you can't figure out how to raise your hand. I think everybody has the ability to talk at this point. All right. All right. Is there any testimony in opposition from the public on this proposal? If there's opposition, please raise your hand. Any opposition? Seeing none, I'm going to go to the committee. Committee, raise your hand if you would like to ask a question of the proponent, if you have any comments, concerns, anything about this proposal, and we can go. All right, first up, Michael Sass.
Yeah, so I have a question regarding the townhomes because it's been kind of like a confusing issue on my side for many years. So under the IRC, each unit is supposed to have its own utilities, water, waste, gas meter, but somehow we see townhomes, they're under the IRC, but using IBC for some reason. And they provide like one fire service for a group of 10 or whatever that number is. So it's not very clear to me exactly, is this amendment targeted for a group of 10 townhomes divided by 1 hour rated wall with one fire service for all 10 of them?
Thank you. That's a very good question. And the answer is yes. For buildings constructed under the IRC as townhomes or townhouses, it'll be a collection of more than 3 units. And that number can be from, it's actually, I don't believe it is actually limited, but if we scroll down onto the supporting information, I'm very wordy. So there's actually quite a bit in here on the technical substantiation for why we have this issue with regards to the definition of the Fireflow calculation area for typical buildings under the IBC versus the IRC, which has a different construction separation requirement. But in answer to your question, this is intended for collections of units that are constructed under the IRC's definition of townhomes or townhouses, not the IBC's definition of townhouses, which is more stringent and would require the application of the strict reading of the IFC's Fireflow calculation area of the entire building.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Mr. Prasad?
so if that's the case, under IRC, the maximum is 3. So I'm not quite sure exactly how buildings get built by IBC, but the point I'm trying to make though is, if I'm reading this correct, it will imply that if I have a duplex, this will apply.
No.
I guess that's the way I'm reading it.
No, a townhouse by definition is 3 or more units. Anything less than 3 is not a townhouse under the IRC.
And 3 or more units with a single service, right, to all of them.
So the Fireflow is outside of the building. Fireflow is defined by the flow available at the hydrants. So it is not subject to how the water service is connected to the individual units.
So, but for
I apologize. I think I confused the issue. So is this related to the fire hydrants outside and not inside the buildings? Is that
That's correct? That's correct.
Yeah,
This is
I apologize. I
no.
confused the issue. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Is that your only question and concerns? Any other comments, Michael, while we have you?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me lower his hand. All right, Robert Merlino.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. I think you kind of just clarified one of them, but I want to double check. This amendment would be less restrictive than base building code. Is that correct?
That is correct, and that is how we are currently applying this requirement.
Okay, and second question, Um, Everywhere I've typically seen in Denver has pretty good water supply. Are there any areas within the city and county of Denver you guys are aware of that have a particularly bad water supply where this could be a potential issue?
I'm sorry, I would have to defer to Tony Caro for that position. I'm not aware of any, but I think Tony might be able to better speak to that position or that question.
Tony?
Yeah, Robert, it's Tony. We have very few areas, we require hydrants to provide at least 1,500 GPM at 20 pounds residual pressure. There's very few areas that fall outside of that. And specifically for this requirement, there's not typically an IRC that requires more than one hydrant to be available. So I don't suspect it's a big issue. And to clarify, Michael, your question earlier, section 102.5 of the fire code identifies that for IRC provisions, we only apply the fire code for 3 items. One is fire access, addressing, and Fireflow or hydrants. So that's section 102.5 of the fire code. So I think this proposal aligns us with the intent of that section.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert, did you have further questions, concerns, comments?
No, that was the only questions I have for now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Aaron?
Hey, John, I think my question is just trying to understand how the calculation works. I'm just trying to think of if we had a 5-unit building with, 3,000 square foot and 2,000 square foot. Are we doing the 2,000 times 5 units to determine that? No. Okay. If you could explain that's my question.
Absolutely. So if we had a 5-unit, and keep in mind, these are townhouses. So these are vertically separated buildings, if you will. Each one a separate unit attached to the other by a fire barrier. And so in your example of having 5 units, and we have, let's say, a 3,000, 3 2,000s, and a 1,000 square foot building, we would base the fire flow on the construction type, whether the units are sprinklered, and the 3,000 square foot area of the largest unit.
Understood. Okay.
Okay. Aaron, any other questions?
No,
Comments?
that's it. Makes sense.
Okay. All right, thank you. Wayne?
No, Wayne can't speak.
Oh, no, Wayne Griswold can't speak.
My reputation precedes me. And I apologize for what I sound like. I unfortunately tested positive for COVID on Sunday. So I'm
Oh, no.
so John, you're safe. No, my question was really just kind of trying to understand it. Is there any anecdotal or fire operational data as it relates to residential responses that would maybe impact this or drive this one way or another? John, you mentioned that this is kind of the way that it's done or the way that it's currently enforced, but just seeing if there was any sort of information that might be useful from an operational perspective to drive this one way or another.
Well, there are certainly, non-Denver sources that have seen fires that expand out of one unit, depending on the response time of the fire department and the construction of the building. But my understanding is that this has been applied for a substantial amount of time here in Denver, and it's also one of the things that I provided my supporting information was a position taken by another jurisdiction on this exact topic. The fact that it's very much unclear all the way at the bottom, because as I said, I'm very wordy. So you have a link there to the Colorado Springs position on fire flow requirements for townhomes. And so this is, again, this is something we've been doing for quite some time, and it's also aligned with other jurisdictions in the area. But for specifics of, have we had an incident where we've had insufficient water, I'm sorry, Tony, but I'm going to have to pass the baton to you once again. Or Tony.
Yeah, I don't think Wayne, certainly in the last decade, We haven't had any incidents where that's been an issue. We did have 2 incidents in townhomes that were being constructed, which was a little bit different situation.
Sure.
And luckily, you know, typically our hydrant coverage in the urban area is more than excellent, just based on a standard grid. So water supply was not an issue.
Okay, fair enough. And that's kind of what I anticipated, just trying to think of it from another angle, I guess, and make sure that we're not. So certainly anything that we can do to clarify something that's already being enforced in a certain way is advantageous, and it seems like this accomplishes that.
You. All right, anybody else from the committee that would like to speak? I don't see any other hands. All right, I'm going to take it back to the public for rebuttal. Now, keep in mind, rebuttal means you're rebutting something somebody just said. So if there's any testimony in support of this proposal, rebutting what somebody said, now's the time. Raise your hand. Rebuttal and support. All right, rebuttal and opposition. Rebuttal and opposition, raise your hand or speak up. Rebuttal and opposition. Okay, seeing no rebuttal, I will come to the committee and ask for a motion in a second, and then we can have further discussion if we need to. Stephen.
I'll make a motion to approve this amendment based on the substantiation provided in the document.
Okay. Approval as submitted. Tony, is that a second?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So I have a motion for an approval as submitted for number 51. Is there any further discussion that we need to have? No? I'm going to lower your hand, Stephen. All right. Seeing no discussion, I'm going to call for the vote at this time. All those in favor of number 51 as submitted, please raise your hand. One, two. Actually, that looks to be unanimous decision of. Oh, can you, Sally, just make sure that I have the count right? 10 at keep the bar.
Yep.
13, 14 to 0,
14.
unanimous.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. So item number 51 passed unanimously as submitted with a vote of 14 to 0. I will lower all of your hands and we will move on to the next item up for bid. Item number 71.
See, John, words do matter. So thank you. I know this was probably your first one since you've been here, but thank you very much. That was very clear.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Good job. Thank you. All right. And now, John, since you're not on the committee, I am going to take you back and make you an attendee again. Right? Maybe I will, and maybe I won't. It's not giving me the option to do that for some reason. Well, this is going to be fun. Huh. All right. Well, I'll just have to hang out there, John. Okay. All right. I am going to call number 71. Item number 71, Tony, that seems to be your proposal. If you would like to give a presentation on your proposal.
Perfect. Good afternoon, Tony Caro, representing Denver Fire Department. And this proposal puts back in the code a section that fell off a couple of code additions. And it's section 105.5.52, fencing posing a hazard to firefighters. And it essentially requires an operational permit for fencing that could pose a physical or health hazard to responding firefighters. including barbed wire and electrified fencing. So this section is just coordinated with what's already in the code in section 316. So from my interpretation, it's a formality to get this back in the code and a clarification, so there's coordination between the two sections. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. All right, let's go to the public. All right, public, do we have anybody that would like to testify in support of this proposal for fencing posing a hazard to firefighters? Any testimony in support? This includes, oh, John, you're over there. How did you get over there? All right.
I moved him.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't know why my stuff is not. All right, any testimony in support? Any testimony in opposition? If you're a member of the public and you oppose this, now's the time to speak up. Any testimony in opposition? Mr. Jelinski.
Thank you. Actually, I guess I'm only in opposition to two numbers on that. Would you consider not specifying voltage to avoid, persnickety people like me with a voltmeter showing that it's not 12 volts? That's all.
Perfect. Thank you. We will put that, we will let Tony answer that in just a moment. Anybody else? All right. I'm going to go back to the public. I'm going to go back to the committee, but before I do, Tony, do you want to speak to that one item of the removing 12 volt?
Sure. I think it's important to maintain that because in section 316, the driving section that requires the fencing only allows 12 volt and lower voltage fencing to prevent potential electrocution to firefighters.
So is it your intent that you want 12 volt or higher here, or that it's less than or just 12 volt? I mean, like, what if it's 13? What if it's 11? So is it, I think what he's trying to say maybe is there needs to be clarification. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that language is already clarified in the 316, the driving section for the requirements.
All right.
Yeah, so 105 is not the driving section. It's only the portion that outlines a need for an operational permit.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Tony. All right, committee. Now's your time for questions, concerns, responses. If you want a modification, anything, now's the time. And the first up is Wayne.
Yeah, I just was going to propose actually a slight revision as it relates to the physical or health hazards. I'm assuming based on the technical justification or the purpose, you mentioned the hazards presented already in section 316. Physical or health hazards is pretty specific to hazardous materials, and I didn't know if that was intentional or not. Just wanted to point that out and see if the actual hazards that you're alluding to here are specific to what's already identified in IFC section 316 or additional physical or health hazards in addition to that. Thank you.
Tony?
Yeah, Wayne, that's a great question. I was only replacing what had been omitted previously. So the health hazard portion has always been identified, and I'm not sure what the root of that was originally.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, when I read it, the first thing I thought was like hazmat, but maybe that's because I've been dealing with hazmat here recently. It seems like we're trying to align it with the precautions in the hazards already identified in IFC section 316, in which case I think we could just amend that to reference specifically those hazards outlined in section 316, assuming that is the intent.
While Tony is looking, do you want to respond, or we want to move to the next?
Yeah, I concur either way, Wayne, and I guess the health portion reading here was intended for booby trap doors
Mhm.
that could have deferring gases.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, Robert. Excuse me.
I just have a numbering question suggestion. The base fire code already has a 105.552 for wood products. So this should be 105.553, I believe.
Do you want it 105.552 and renumber things after it, or do you want to put it at the end so you don't have to renumber things?
Yeah, we may have to ask Glenn Mathewson, but we pretty much renumbered everything to accommodate this in the F's section.
And I guess truly what will really happen is, because there might be, as we go through all of this, there's probably going to be a bunch of things that get renumbered. And so generally we will go through and make sure everything has its right numbers and gets put in the right place, and then give it to Denver to just review to make sure that it's in the right place. So I'm not too worried about numbering. The numbering that we are worried the most about is it even supposed to be 105.5? Is it supposed to be 105.4? Or you know what I mean? Like if it's something that specific, like it's in the totally wrong section, then we need to know. But as far as 52 or 53, we'll pick that up at the end.
Okay, good enough. Thanks.
Anything else, Robert, that you want to talk about? No?
Nope.
Okay, Brad?
Would you be up for pulling up section 316? Just
And while she's pulling that up, this is all in here alphabetically, this list. And so again, as Shauna said, at the end of this process, once we know what was approved, modified, not approved, there'll be a final cleanup and sort of clerical organization of your final amendment package.
Yeah, Shauna, you probably want to go to the amendments, which has the fencing requirements.
That one is not as easy to find.
Yeah, 316.
Because my computer is at the doctor's office, so I'm in a view only blue beam, and so I can't just go exactly where I want to, so I have to scroll, but that's okay, we'll get there maybe.
Shauna, I can send you over the Word document of the most recent amendment, baseline amendments, if that'd be helpful to you.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that might be good. I probably can get those in the.
I'll zip it over to you real quick.
Oh, I can get it in the Google Drive probably, but yeah, this is fun. You guys have a lot of definitions. All right, chapter 3. We're getting there. Here we go.
so fences is listed twice.
Electrified fences and fences.
And one, okay. So Tony, I was just wondering if there'd be any wisdom in just referencing 316.7 in that requirement for an operational permit, something along the line, in accordance with DVCA, or however we reference the fire code amendments, IFCA, section 316.7 or 316.7.1.
Yeah, that's a great idea, Brad, because that would really help the end users that come in to pull these permits. It's usually people that aren't real familiar with the fire code. Fencing companies.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Okay, so somebody needs to be thinking about what that amendment will look like, or propose some wording about that, so that when we get to the motion section, you guys will have an amendment ready of what that might look like when approved by the fire code official. A permit is required, and maybe that's something Glenn can help us with too, to figure out how to just reference 316 instead of maybe listing out. All right, Brad, any other comments, concerns?
No, ma'am, that was it.
All right, thank you, George.
Tony, I was trying to understand the intent of the word structure primarily. When approved by the fire code official, a permit is required. So is this basically your ticket to say, I don't like this, and they'll go get a permit? Or is there something that somehow isn't arbitrary about whether a permit's required or not?
Or is it where the fencing is approved by the official and permits required?
I think we have to just step backwards. What's the intent? Is the intent to permit every fence? Or is the intent to just have the latitude that if somebody sees something they don't like, I've got authority by the fire code official to request a permit?
And I think, Shauna, if we go back to 316, I think both those sections refer to fire code official approval. So I think the statement just coordinates with the sections, George.
Okay. See, and this is more specific. This is basically telling you if it's barbed wire, it needs to be approved. This statement doesn't tell me that. The one that we're looking at, the one just written.
What I believe the proposal here is saying in the permitting part is saying when the fire code official has approved the type of fence, and that coming from 316, then you'll get a permit. Basically just a clarifier that the permit is going to be issued once that fence has been approved.
That's great. I just didn't know how to read this. So now I'm trying to be more specific.
So Glenn, so all of you, I think, need to maybe, if you're in agreement with this going in, we need to be working on wording that would make it more clear that that's really what you're saying, that when the type of fence in accordance with 316 is approved by the fire code official, a permit is required or something. Okay, so be thinking about those words. Michael?
Yeah, I had the same question as George, and just to take it a step further, is it any fence, or is it fence during construction, or like within a private property of some sort? Or
Well, 316 is,
This is an operational permit as opposed to a construction permit, because you don't have codes for the construction of these items. So that's where you get the fire official reviewing the construction being proposed, be that some crazy, barbed wire, electrification, all the different creative methods someone may come up with. And then once that building, the fire official has approved that, then this kicks in the need for the operational permit.
yeah, it's under the section hazards to firefighters. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's during construction. All right, Michael, other questions, concerns?
no, I'm good.
Thank you, Stephen.
I understood, I think, what the intent was of getting a permit, but then my question after the discussion that Michael raised and George raised is what barbed wire, razor wire, and electric fences would be permittable, approved by the fire official? I mean, I would think all of those present a hazard to firefighters. How do you what kind of electric fence, what kind of razor wire fence, what kind of barbed wire fence, I guess is acceptable, other than you just want to know of the fencing and you issue a permit for it and then you let firefighters know it's there. Is that the intent?
Great question, Steve, and it's twofold. One is we want to mitigate access to the sites that are trying to be very secure. So, usually if they provide multiple gates with Knox boxes or easy access for firefighters on different sides, then sometimes we're okay with the barbed wire at the top of the fencing. So it satisfies both needs, what you said and what I just described.
Got it. I just needed to ask the question, Tony, so it sounds like the fencing material will be approved to keep the bad guys out, but you want to figure out how to minimize injury to firefighters through other gates or turning off the electric fence, I guess. I don't know what the procedure is. I've never done that, but you've answered the question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
And we also, where the security is very heavy, we also put notes in our dispatch so that responding crews are alerted en route about the conditions for access.
Perfect. Any other committee questions, concerns before I take it to the public? All right.
I have a suggested rewording just based on some of the comments the committee's made.
Okay.
This may handle some of your concerns and provide that pointer back to 316. If perhaps something along the lines of where hazardous fences, walls, retaining walls, or similar barriers are approved by the fire code official in accordance with 316.7, comma, a permit, et cetera, et cetera. That might help. It provides the same list that you have in 316. It puts the word hazardous in there, so it's clear that we're talking about just not just all everyday fences that are installed, but the hazardous fences that are referenced by 316.7.
But then you're saying, so you say all of that about the hazards and everything according to a 316, and then you say a permit is required for any fencing type that poses the hazard. So do you need to say it twice, or you're just saying a permit is required, period?
Yeah, I mean, I guess along with that, you could simplify putting it in that, taking out that second section. I was just trying to help get that pointer back to 316.7 and provide more clarity about the permit is after the fire official has reviewed and approved the suggested hazardous fence.
All right, thank you, Glenn. Greg?
Do we want to clarify the type of permit, i.e. operational permit?
Tony?
Yeah, so I think, great question, Greg. Section 105 is operational permits
Okay,
in
great.
general.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
I was just going to offer, maybe just for simplicity, you could say when approved by the fire code official in accordance with section 316.7 or 316.7.1, comma, a permit is required, ... the rest of the thing. So it's when approved by the fire code official in accordance with those sections, a permit is required.
Okay. Excellent. George?
And I just want to reiterate that wherever we can clarify by extra words, in some cases, this really helps. I have no issues with leaving the trailing edge, because I think the whole point of this is letting it know that, hey, we don't want to have the barbed wire or electrified fences risking our firefighters. So having them in both places is fine with me. It also kind of says what we've been trying to do to our Denver amendments for all these years is educate and not hide. And so additional information here, I think, is applicable.
Thank you, Wayne.
Yeah, I think that at some point we need to point back to section 316. I don't think we can be so specific to point to 316.17.1 from the standpoint that, based on how it's written now, because it's not just electrified fencing, which is specific to that section. So I like the idea of pointing it back there somehow, but I think we have to be careful of being too specific as well.
Mhm. Yeah, to say 316.7 and 7.1 to catch both. Is that what you're?
Well, I would say, well, hold on. I'm trying to look at the base code while reading this as well.
I know, it's fun.
I'm just wondering if it still shouldn't just be generic to section 316, because there are potential, I mean, there's pitfalls listed here, obstructions on roofs, security devices.
Okay.
So I think I would still point back to 316, the general section, to kind of encompass this and make sure that we're detailing what hazards and or what hazards we're specifically concerned with.
Thank you. All right, any other comments? Let's see, I don't know, Glenn, do you still have a comment?
Just about specifying it's an operational permit. That wouldn't be unusual. A lot of the other sections in 105 do state an operational permit is required. So that could be simply after the comma, simply adding the word operational. It currently says a permit is required, but that could be modified to say an operational permit, just to add the clarification that was commented on.
All right, thank you, Brad.
I just wanted to point out real quick that the proposed amendment deals specifically with fences. There is specific language in those sections, 306.7, 306.7.1, that grants the fire code official the authority to permit those fences. So pointing back to 316 in general, which includes pitfalls to firefighters, trap doors, all kinds of other things that are not permitted by the fire code official, I think adds more ambiguity. I think it should be a specific pointer to the section that is allowing this permit to be issued.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to take one more comment and then I'm going to go to the public and I'm going to bring this back for more conversation once we get a motion and we see what modification is being proposed. That way we can hammer out the details of the modification at that time. Jacqueline.
Oh yeah, this is just kind of nitpicky, but if we're going to keep the 12 volts electrified fencing, I think we should state it the same way that it's stated in 316, where it states it's like powered by a 12 volt direct current power source. I don't know if that would help clarify some of the stuff that was brought up in the beginning, but I don't know if we're going to keep that part. I just think it should match the exact same phrasing as the other section if we're referring to the other section. That was it.
Excellent, thank you. All right, at this time, it sounds like most of the committee is in favor. They're just wanting some reference to 316 and some clarification. So I'm going to go to the public right now and ask the public to weigh in. Now, you're just in rebuttal and you have actually 1 minute to speak, so pay no attention to my little timer, but I haven't had to use it yet. 1 minute to speak in support of what we're doing here, and specifically if you have anything about the amendment that's being thought of right now. So testimony in support by the public, please raise your hand if you are wanting to speak in support of this proposal. Any public in support? Opposition. Any public wishing to speak in opposition to this proposal, and we're just in rebuttal. Speaking in opposition? All right, seeing none. Committee, I'm going to ask you for a motion. Here's my suggestion. I would move to say approval as submitted with the intent to modify. That way, if your modification doesn't pass, we still have as submitted on the table and we don't have to start over. So approval as submitted with the intent to modify would be my suggestion.
I move to approve as submitted with intent to modify.
Okay. All right. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Who was that that said that?
Brad Emmerich, and then who
Brad,
second?
thank you.
Who was the
George.
second? George second. All right, Brad, let's hear your modification.
Simply insert the text after fire code official, between fire code official and the comma. In accordance with, and help me here, how do we refer to the fire code amendments?
In the past, it's been IFCA.
If you're in the nomenclature that's used at the moment in your amendments and what's been talked about going forward is if you're making this change in the fire code and you're referencing another section of that same code, you don't need to repeat the title again. If you were referencing to the IBC, you would repeat in accordance with the International Building Code section, etc. So it would just be section 316.7 or 316.7.1.
Okay. Thank you.
And I have drafted out some suggested language with the comment about using the same sentence structure used in 316.1, speaking about the powering of the system being a 12-volt direct current. And that would alleviate the other concern that was spoken about if someone actually put a voltmeter on it and found it wasn't exactly 12. That could be a little persnickety, and that would cover it by saying it's the design of the system.
Okay, can you tell me what, I mean, we'll run that by Brad and see if it's okay to, we can further so here's what we have a couple things we can do. One, we can take this modification, talk only about this modification. Two, we can bring in Glenn's modification, talk only about that, and then go back to this one, and then go back to the main motion. So, but the easiest way is, Glenn, tell us what you're thinking, and maybe Brad will just amend his modification to include that wording. If not, if he doesn't want to, then we'll talk just about that amendment.
Sure. So I, coming right after barbed wire, and then starting after wire, this is just copying the language over. It'd say, or electrified fences powered by a 12-volt direct current, parenthetical DC power source.
Okay, wait. Or electrified fencing.
Electrified fences
fences
powered by a 12-volt direct current, parenthetical DC power source. And that would model the language in 316.7.1. And it would take care of the concerns of what the actual current at that moment of the fence was, or at least if it hasn't been a problem in 316.7.1.
All right, I would first say, Brad, do you want to include that in yours, or do we want to handle these separately?
Oh, yeah, no, I like the way I said that.
Okay, perfect. All right, so this is our current modification. And so, George, I would ask if you are okay as your second. We still can modify it further, but we want to just get this on the table.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so here's our modification as we have it right now, adding in accordance with 316.7 and 7.1, and then bringing in the wording from those sections for the power source on the electrified fence. Let's have discussion on this, Mr. Rondinelli.
Yes, question, and maybe someone can help me, Glenn or someone else. I understand us wanting to get a permit for the fencing hazards that would be created. Do we have to get a permit for any of the other items in 316 that would be just as much a hazard to firefighters that are listed in there? Meaning shaftways that are marked in buildings that might have a sign on them, but from what Tony was sharing, that this goes into like a dispatch record. And I guess the question is there other items under permits that would direct us to that? Or I'm not one for having permits for everything, but it sure seems if we're concerned with hazards with respect to razor wire, electric fences, we'd be concerned with shaftways, transmission lines, et cetera. I mean, we're approving it generally. but you have a permit process. So I guess it's more of a question.
Okay, one moment. Because we're in this, we have a motion on the floor and we're in discussion, I have to go in the order. So whoever has the answer to that question, make sure that you raise your hand so that you can discuss it, but I'm gonna go in the order. Wayne was next.
Steve, that was definitely my initial logic as to why I was thinking maybe a more general section reference made sense, but I think Brad's clarification that this is specific to fencing makes all the sense in the world. And now as amended, I think provides clear guidance that this is specific to fencing and those hazards specific to fencing. I think your question still is warranted, but for the purposes of this section, I like it as amended. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else? I don't see any more hands raised.
I just
Steven,
wanted to double check about the including the term operational in front of permit. If you guys wanted to do that as well, that would match the other sections in 105.5 where it does specify operational permit.
I mean, if you're asking me, I don't have an objection to it. I think Tony pointed out that this whole section 105 is for operational permits, but if it's repeated in the, and there are literally 100 and I don't know, there's 100 and something operational permits listed in that section, and some of them say operational permit and some don't. So precedent said it could go either way. It doesn't take away anything.
Anyone else wishing to speak on this? Do you want to leave operational in or out? Greg.
I say included for simplicity. There's no question then.
Excellent.
Yeah, I just quickly correct myself. In the base code IFC, the term operational appears consistently. In your amended versions of those, you are correct. It doesn't specify that quite as often in that section.
All right. I'm going to ask if this is the amendment as we would like to vote, or if we want to do something different. I'm seeing no more hands, no more discussion. So with that, this modification is here. We don't have any further modifications, so we're just going to vote the whole proposal for as modified. All those in favor of as modified, please raise your hand. I think I have 13.
That's 13.
All right, all those, let me lower the hand here. All those opposed? And all those abstaining? Chief, is there a vote there for, against, or abstaining? I see a hand now.
It's
What is
for
that?
my apologies. I don't know what's going on with my computer. It keeps I keep falling off the meeting, so I apologize.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, no worries. Okay, so 14-0. All right, thank you. All right, so number 71 approved 14-0. All right, I'm going to just put this down here because I don't want to delete it since we modified it. All right. Number 72, we'll call to the floor. Number 72. Tony, this is yours.
Hey, Tony, Carl, representing Denver Fire Department again. Can we scroll down some, Shauna, so I can see it?
Yeah. Makes sense. There you go.
Okay, and this section's similar. It was dropped out of the amendments for some reason, couple code cycles. This section appears in the base IFC. And it's 105.6.13 gates, barricades across fire apparatus access roads. The construction permit is required for the installation of or modification to a gate or barricade across a fire apparatus access road. So again, this just aligns with Chapter 5 and ensures we issue these permits. Thank you.
All right. All right. Let's go to the public. Any testimony in support of this proposal from the public? If you would like to speak in favor of the proposal, please raise your hand or speak now. Any testimony in support? Testimony in opposition from the public? Testimony in opposition. And opposition, last call. All right, committee. Any discussion? Brad?
Just a point of clarification that section 105.7 in the fire code is for construction permits. So I don't know, Tony, did you want to say an operational permit is required and leave it in 105.6? Or did you want to say a construction permit is required where I think it should be in 105.7?
The 2021 fire code shifted those sections back. So 105.6 is required construction permits in the 21. So that was an adjustment. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for the clarity. Yeah, I was looking at the existing amendments and it was off by one. Okay. Thank you.
That's what I'm here for.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else? No? All right. So there's no further discussion from the committee. All right, one thing that I'll point out, just in case moving forward, that came up on a couple of meetings that I've been on so far. Sometimes people don't speak, but then they vote in opposition. And so if you're going to vote in opposition, please at least give the proponent a reason. So that's just something that's come up recently. All right, with that, I'm not going to go out to rebuttal from the public because there's nothing to rebut. And so I will ask the committee for a motion. Stephen?
Motion to approve as submitted based on
Alright.
substantiation and discussion.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wayne.
Second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded that we approve as submitted proposal number 72 for gates and barricades. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor of number 71 as submit, or number 72 as submitted, please raise your hand. And that looks like a unanimous 14. 14-0. So number 72 has been approved with a vote of 14-0. Thank you all so much. Awesome. We're rocking and rolling. All right, let's call to the floor item number 58. Let me lower your hands here. All right. Oops, you do not want to see Excel. 58. All right, so item number 58, this is a proposal, Tony, also. Did we lose Tony?
Here we go. Sorry about that. Tony Carl, representing Denver Fire Department. And this is a proposal to add a new construction permit for phased occupancy plans. And we're proposing to put it 105.6.21. Construction permits required to obtain approval for a phased occupancy approach of a new building. Visit Denver Fire Department website to obtain phased occupancy policy outlining requirements and procedures to satisfy section 901.5.1. So in general, this is a process that has been in place for many decades, but has never been codified. And with our recent surge in construction and phased occupancy becoming more and more standard in the construction industry, I think it's time that we codify our process and outline the requirements so that we're all working off the same requirements and we understand what those requirements are. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Tony. All right, let's go to the public. Is there anybody wishing to speak in support of this proposal number 70 or 58, excuse me? Testimony in support. Last call for support. Opposition. Anybody wishing to speak in opposition? Testimony in opposition of this proposal. All right, let's go to the committee. Committee questions, concerns, comments? Michael.
Yeah, I'm very happy to see this amendment because this, from the design side, that comes very often when we design a project. The only question I have is, I tried to look for section 901.5.1 and I couldn't find that section. I don't know, maybe, can we take a look on that really quick?
Is it in the amendments or the base fire code?
It is not an amendment, Shauna. That's in the base fire code.
So if this is amendment, do we need to say IFC section 901?
No, because it's
Alright.
referencing it from the same code.
Okay. All right. Let me look
Can
here.
we take a look on that? Yeah.
Where is it at? No, that's way too far. 9. What was it, 905.1?
901.5.1.
Oh, 901. Yeah, there you go, 901.5.
Right there.
Okay. And so the amendment is this 58, yeah. Did that answer your question, Michael?
Yeah, I just need to read that section on my own really quick, but yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Robert?
Yeah, I was looking for a reference to this on Denver Fire's website and I couldn't find any reference to current requirements. Is there something there currently, Tony?
Yeah, Robert, if you look under the policies, look under the P for phased occupancy, and you'll see the policy that's posted on there.
Okay, I'll look that up here in a second. I guess my concern is having a reference in the code to visit Denver Fire website, which can change, and not a specific reference to something in the fire code about requirements for phased occupancy. That's all I have for now, though.
Okay. Tony, did you want to address just that before we move on?
Yeah, I think, Robert, this is no different than we do it in the building code, I believe. And Glenn, you might help me out on here, but I think there's several sections where we reference policies.
Yes, there is throughout your amended codes, there are a lot of areas where you reference your policies. And I brought up the policy here. A lot of times it's a subject where it's a little bit more difficult to codify it in that type of language. It's also something where it allows a little more flexibility to the department between code cycles to handle such special approvals. The most recent one was modified October 1st of 2021. So that's pretty recent. So it can kind of go to show that this allows just a little more flexibility. And that's generally what policies are used for. It's a 6-page policy.
I guess I would feel better about it if it referenced the specific policy and not just visit Denver Fire website.
I see.
The policy is titled Phased Occupancy Requirements for TCO. So that could maybe slightly clarify, say, to simply get that title exactly matching what you would find in that policy on the website.
Yeah, Robert, and that's a good point. And the phased occupancy is not identified anywhere in the code. Usually, we refer to policies by the code section number that they describe. But because there is no phased occupancy section in the code, this one's a challenging one.
Okay. So be thinking if there's some different wording that you would want to put there, maybe the actual name of the policy to make it easier to find. Stephen.
Yes, I'll share some of the previous comments. Thank you, Tony and Denver Fire, for getting a policy published and referenced in the code. I know this question gets asked dozens and dozens of times of consultants on how we could possibly get a building, occupied via phased occupancy. This at least gives us a plan to get there. I too was a little concerned referencing a policy that could change and question whether we should just not put that language into the body of the code, but I'm okay with it being referenced as a policy. For those that may have not studied it well, it's difficult to achieve, but at least there's some methodology to get there now. I mean, for a long time, Denver Fire has accepted phased occupancy in some buildings and not in others. And I'll say of recent years, there's just not been much of any phased occupancy. And I've always had to tell clients, just the building has to be done. And so this policy that's referenced by the fire code helps identify that. It still requires a plan to be submitted and approved, which helps clients at least have an opportunity to develop such a plan. So I'll be in favor of this amendment and referencing the policy.
Thank you, Stephen. George?
Yeah, I had basically two comments. One is it's fantastic, getting anything like this up front and making it more formal as with a permit is excellent, because a lot of times these things sneak up on you as they get delayed in projects and it becomes an afterthought. So creating a permit for this, I'm strongly in favor of. And then the second element is I do believe it needs to stay a policy. I think there needs to be some fluidity on what we see from month to month, what we see from year to year with the various experiences we have with phased occupancy, but getting it down to where a permit's required up front is a very strong thing to do for the city of Denver. So thank you, Tony.
Excellent. Thank you, George. Wayne?
Is there any reason we can't include existing buildings here as well? I know of a couple scenarios where modifications are going to be required of a building that may or that will substantially jeopardize life safety and likely lead to floors being demobilized and unoccupied, and wondering if there's any objection to also including existing buildings where the renovation or the reconstruction of the building warrants it.
That's a great question, Wayne. And usually in the city of Denver process, existing buildings seldom relinquish their existing certificate of occupancy. So this policy would not apply because that building retains their certificate of occupancy through renovation or reconstruction. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I think that a similar approach for existing buildings, where you've got those types of situations would be useful. This probably isn't the appropriate place for it. But I like where this is going and think, if we can think about, maybe as part of a future amendment, how this could be incorporated to existing buildings as well, I think would also be beneficial.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes, again, I like the permit idea, but I'm still not very clear. So I looked at the IFC and basically it says if there's sprinklers and the fire alarm operational, you're ready to go. But on the Denver amendments, do we have right now kind of like an appendix N of some sort where it kind of spells out what you need to do in order to get the phase occupancy? Like have a 2-floor buffer or submit a plan? On that part, I'm not very clear.
So in the Denver building code amendments, the ones that are not the administrative chapter, not the administrative chapter ones of the individual codes, but in the larger administrative chapter, section 142.6 is temporary certificate of occupancy. And that is also referenced in that policy under the title where it provides the number. It references both IFC 901.5.1 that we just looked at, as well as the Denver Building Code Administration Code. And so that's where you're finding all of the details for what's required to receive that temporary certificate of occupancy.
Okay, I'll have to study that really quick.
And then as far as the other comment about existing buildings, perhaps a suggestion is that after new building, stating a phased occupancy approach for new buildings or a change of occupancy, where you would be getting a new CO issued due to alterations of an existing building that changed the occupancy listed on this CO.
Okay, thank you. Brad?
Yeah, I would just like to echo support of what Wayne was saying, that, yeah, I think it would be a good idea to write it so that existing buildings would be included. It doesn't happen often, but there are times when existing buildings are reoccupied, and I think it might head off an argument sometime in the future where an owner designer might say, well, hey, this only applies to new buildings. I have an existing building. So I don't think it hurts anything to maybe just remove the word new from the proposed language. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out.
I guess you would have to make sure also that the phased occupancy policy dealt with those existing buildings as well. Probably. Guessing. I don't know. All right, so that's an idea. I'm just going to do this just because it's an idea. Excellent. Or to, as Glenn had an idea of just saying approach of a new building or change of occupancy, but then it would only apply at change of occupancy and not any existing building. All right, George.
My only concern about this is that I think we're adding more complexity than we need to, and I think we really need to address that phased occupancy is typically something as large as a new building. When we start talking about change in occupancy, that generally shuts that building down and it's getting recertified anyway. is there really that many opportunities to where we need to say new or existing, or if we can just leave new? And I don't have the background for that, but I would love to have the answer. Is that yes, there's enough examples that it needs to be here and it makes it more confusing, or somehow this, we can leave it simple. So my concern is making it more complex for something to which typically my experience has been it's all new building, even if it's something that's a change in occupancy, that building's been shut down, it's being recertified. So maybe something to address that.
And I think Tony, again, from Denver Fire, just to bring some clarity, we are working another policy. I hear what everyone's saying for existing buildings, but that's a little different approach. And that's going to be a tenant finish or tenant improvement policy, discussing what happens to life safety in that building for those construction floors and adjacent occupied areas. But it's a completely different scheme than this particular policy. Two different tracks, but that tenant finish policy is in the works currently.
Thank you. And I guess I just would add that very few places in the code deal with existing and new in the exact same code section.
So
Glenn?
the charging statement in the policy is the design and construction team shall present the phased occupancy plan for review and approval prior to initiating vertical construction to ensure all compartments and systems, etc. So that is kind of speaking in that first charging statement to your new construction.
Thank you. And Michael?
I am in agreement with George as far as the existing. We just need to be careful about that. As far as existing buildings, you can take an existing building like an office building that gets converted to residential, and that's pretty clear cut. I mean, it's a change of occupancy. It's basically a new project. But if it used to be an apartment and it's a total gut and remodel, and it's going to stay the same occupancy, obviously it is an existing building as well. But then there's work on existing buildings all over the place. So I just want to be very cautious about that, the word existing.
Thank you. Brad?
Right. So the steel building on 16th Street Mall was the existing building, and they basically took it down. They left the structure, the superstructure, and they took it down to, what we say is the studs, but obviously there's no studs in that building. And then they built it back out and they phased the occupancy when they did it. So it's not that it's 100% one way or the other, but it does happen. And I guess I would say that if we don't specify new or existing, at least it gives the opportunity to apply what we know is a good policy, a good phased occupancy approach to a building like that, where it was existing, it was completely redone, and it was the re-occupancy of it was phased. And this is calling for a construction permit. So in essence, or construction permits, I guess, for the different phases of occupancy. That's true with anything. I mean, they're supposed to pull construction permits for changes in use, through construction permits for new buildings. So, that this is emphasizing it needs to be done for phased occupancy versus just the construction of the building, I think applies to both new, and I know it has applied to existing, even though I agree it doesn't happen very often.
Thank you very much, Brad. Wayne?
Yeah, Brett, I agree with everything you just said. I would just contribute a little bit more from the context of, right, where we've got a change in use and we've got the IEBC to drive ultimately what those change in use requirements are. They're going to be silent on what Brad's talking about, which is that phased occupancy. And phased occupancy in an existing building, or where the building is existing, is is likely going to be more costly and more challenging from a logistical point of view, in which case the phased occupancy approach is almost certainly going to be an element that the design and construction team are going to want to consider using. If we can point to this provision as a way of, kind of having a proverbial arrow in our quiver to give them a phased occupancy approach in that scenario, that's great. If Tony, you think that your tenant improvement policy that's in development accomplishes that, then that's also great. As Brad alluded to, I just want to make sure that this policy or the construct of this policy is accessible from from an existing building perspective.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, I am going to give Tony one chance to respond if he wants to. Otherwise, we need to get to the public because we can have the rest of this conversation when we come back after a motion has been made.
I'm okay, Shauna, thank you.
Okay, all right. All right, let's go out to the attendees. So it sounds like attendees that there may be a modification in the works, whether that's removing the word new and just having it apply to buildings, or specifying a phased occupancy policy, the actual name of that policy. If you want to testify in support of this proposal and anything that you've heard or in rebuttal, you have 1 minute to rebut. Anybody wishing to speak in support of the proposal? Anybody wishing to speak in support of this proposal? In opposition? Anybody wishing to speak in opposition to something you've heard? Rebuttal in opposition? Seeing none. Committee, I would come to you for a motion.
Move as submitted with modifications.
As submitted with the intent to modify. Is there a second?
Second.
Stephen? Okay, thank you. That was Brad and
Who
Stephen.
made Brad and Stephen? Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Brad, would you like to give us your modification?
I would offer to delete the word new and to replace the words phased occupancy policy with the title of the actual policy.
And Shauna, that is phased occupancy requirements for TCO.
Leaving the word policy in there. Yeah, right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. That is the modification that's on the floor. Is there any discussion for that modification? No? Any further modifications? Any concerns, questions? We're good to go. Tony, you're good with this modification. You're the proponent.
Yep, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further discussion on this modification, we're going to vote the proposal as modified. So item number 58 is presented here as modified. All those in favor, please raise your hand. I have 13, it looks like. 13 in favor. All right, I'm going to drop the hands. All those opposed to as modified? And all those abstaining? Greg, you did not vote.
I thought I pushed raised hand, but there it is.
For in favor?
Yes.
Okay, all right, then that proposal passes with a vote of 14-0 for as modified the way that you see here. With that, it is 3:40-ish. So we need to take a break. We're at halfway point, a little bit more. I just want you to know that we have only approved, or we have only gone through 4 proposals out of our 13. So I'm going to ask as we move forward. Chief, did you have something you needed to say? You have a raised hand from Chief there. I don't know how you say your name. Nope. Okay.
Sorry about that. For some
No.
reason, every time I raise or lower my hand, it kicks me off the program. So I have to come back quickly, try to move my hand again. I have no idea.
I'm so sorry. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break. 5 minutes and come back, and then I will run the timer, and we'll come back and we'll start up with number 73, and we're going to move quickly, have very concise comments, and we're going to get going on these. All right, so take a break for 5 minutes. Don't forget to mute, and you can turn your video off if you want to.
Shauna, was that last one 14.0 or 13.1?
14.0.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Ask the committee members to raise their hands so we can just make sure we have a quorum coming back from our break. Or if you can't raise your hand, turn on your camera and wave at me or something. Russell. Let me see who we got here. Russell, I don't see a raised hand for Russell. I get a couple things off on my screen. Maybe that'll help me. All right, Glenn is there. All right. Well, I think we have at least 13. I think the only one missing right now is Russell. So I think we are good. All right. I'll lower all those hands. All right, thanks everybody. We're gonna move right into the next one, and I'm gonna ask that we try to keep our comments concise. If you agree with somebody, just if you as they say at the code hearings, no Me Too testimony. You can just say Me Too, and or I agree with that, unless you have something that you have to say that that hasn't been said. That's great. We just need to, all of those will be on record. We need to keep moving because we aren't even halfway done with our agenda. All right, I'm going to move forward and prove number 73, David Hill. David Hill, let me go see if he is here. David, I'm going to make you a presenter, hopefully. It might take a second, maybe, or promote to panelist. I don't know. It's not letting me. Maybe Sally. No.
Okay, let me try 1 second.
Yesterday it let me do everything. I don't know what is going on today.
Promote to panelist.
If not, we're just gonna, then he just won't be able to show his camera, and we're gonna ask him to unmute and at least give his presentation on his proposal so that we can keep moving. We just won't be able to see your face, David. Hopefully you can unmute yourself. David Hill. Well,
I'm sorry, this is John Waichis. I'm talking to him on Teams. I'm trying to get him, make sure he's over there.
oh, gotcha. Okay. Thank you, John.
He says it's not working.
It's not working. Can you ask him to log out and log back in? we could
Okay, he can hear
maybe-
you. He's
Oh, he
just, he's gonna log out and log back in as you asked.
Okay, thank you. I'm just wondering if, well, I hate to move to the next one.
Hey, Shauna, it's Tony with Denver Fire. I can present on his behalf.
Okay, if you're fine, and then we can give him a chance if he's able to join us.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, Tony Caro, Denver Fire Department. Representing Dave Hill as a team member. Section 105, 631, we would be adding underground hazardous material storage tanks. Modifying it. And specifying that a construction permit is required to install any hazardous material storage tank. With the intent to clarify language. Thank you.
Gotcha. All right. Perfect. I don't know. Let's see, David, if you want to add anything, if you have the ability to talk. Oh, there you are. We hear you, kind of. Nope. All right. Okay,
Hello?
well, oh, now we hear you. David? We hear you. Just not talking, we just hear microphone rustling. All right, so Tony presented this proposal on your behalf, David, if you can hear us. Now we're going to go to the public to see if there is any testimony in support of this proposal. Testimony in support. Anybody wishing to speak, please raise your hand. Testimony in opposition of this proposal. And this is proposal number 73 regarding tank construction. Testimony in opposition. Seeing none. Committee. Discussion. Jacqueline.
This will be quick, and I don't know how important it is to the code, but would it be easier just to remove both underground and above ground and have hazardous material storage tanks? Is there any other circumstance that wouldn't be covered under just the general term?
All right, anybody, Tony, you want to address that? Or I don't know if David is able to join us, but she's just saying that other than underground or above ground, is there a different tank and you just want to cover those two, or can it just say hazardous tanks?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think what David's done is he's just consistent with the base code, which usually has provisions for either underground or above ground. So it typically identifies both and specifies different differing provisions. So it may be important to keep those descriptions.
Okay. Any other conversations? Comments? Greg?
Tony, real quick, is there any volume type information that specifies the definition of a tank?
Like, when is it a hazardous material storage tank? Or is that volume?
Yeah, I'm just trying to, when we get into a tank, we want to make, I'm just trying to get clarity on, does a tank only refer to a certain volume? We'll just say a certain number of gallons or above, that becomes a tank, and it's something below that is not referred to as a tank? Are we like pigeonholing ourselves?
Right. But is a 55-gallon drum, is that a tank or a?
Right.
Gotcha.
So tank is defined in the IFC base code as a vessel containing more than 60 gallons.
There you go.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Glenn.
Glenn.
All right.
Yeah, and-
Anybody else?
And to add to that, Greg, usually quantities are deciphered based on the hazardous materials at
Material.
hand.
Okay.
Excellent. Any other conversation? All right, I'm going to go to the public to just rebut what you've heard, which is whether or not you agree with removing underground and above ground or what a tank is. Those are the only two things actually discussed. So testimony and support, discussing only those two things. Testimony and support. Testimony in opposition. Any opposition? Seeing none, I would come to the committee for a motion. Jacqueline.
I'd motion just to, with Tony's kind of response back, just motion to approve as written.
Okay. Is there a second? Greg? All right, so there's been a motion and a second for the proposal as submitted. I'm gonna remove this highlighting. All right, any discussion? Glenn?
Shauna, real quick, I just searching the code in this, looks like I missed this in the review part. If you could hyphenate above ground, that's the way it's presented elsewhere in the code. And in accordance with what Tony was saying, you do see both terms utilized to make sure that the reader understands specifically which type of tank is being discussed.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Glenn. All right, any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor of proposal number 73 for as submitted, please raise your hand. I'm missing one. Oh no, I'm not missing him. All right, perfect. So that is 14. So that proposal has been approved 14-0 with no abstentions. Thank you very much. Let's move on now to, I'm not gonna save it. Oh, I should have saved it because I didn't hyphenate. Darn it. I'll do that. Will you just make note, Sally, that there's a hyphen for above ground?
Yep.
I didn't save that. All right, proposal number 57 is next. 57 looks like Michaela. And for the sleeping room definition, I don't remember seeing Michaela on here.
Yeah, I could do that one if you would like.
Okay, wait, let me put hands down because there are a ton of them raised. So lower all the hands and we'll start over.
Hey, Shauna, Tony with Denver
Yeah.
Fire, point of clarification, this proposal was voted down in the IEBC committee.
Correct.
Would it be relevant now in the IFC committee? Since it's not really the driver?
I can tell you just to that point, the IBC committee felt that it didn't belong there, but they did in their testimony say that the IEBC or the IFC committee might, I mean, not the IEBC, the IFC committee might, because they speak to sleeping rooms in different ways than the IBC does sometimes, that they wanted to give the IBC or the IFC committee a chance to hear it themselves to decide if it fit there. It did not pass in the IBC. Actually, the IEBC, we haven't heard those proposals yet in the IFC. So they just said there may be a reason that the IFC committee might want it. So we left it on the agenda. All right, Glenn. You're muted. Thank you.
This is the current added definition in the IRC to clarify what is a sleeping room, since often that's a bed or furniture that creates it as such, and that's not something you can actually regulate in a construction code. So that's the intent of why this has been included in the past in the IRC. And the proponent just felt that since that term sleeping room is utilized throughout the other family of codes, that it would make sense to correlate them together. And so that's what you have is the verbatim current amended or added definition in the IRC.
Thank you. We'll go to the public. If there's not somebody on the public, which I think there is, that might speak to this, I will let you know what the testimony was from the IBC on why they disapproved it. Let's go to the public. Is there anybody that wishes to testify in support of adding this sleeping room definition just to the IFC? You see others here, but that's just a 3-part proposal. So just adding this definition of sleeping room. Any testimony in support? Mr. Jelensky.
Yes, hello, Sean and committee. I would like, first of all, yeah, I like the, in general, consolidation and consistency within the code. So I certainly support that. I'd like you to consider the ramifications. I'm not sure right now what that would be. In my world, in a lot of healthcare design, we see, first of all, doctor sleeping rooms with it buried within a hospital. We see sleep labs that involve sleeping places where it's intended for people to sleep within a otherwise be occupancy. And other kind of on-call and also healthcare in various, not just I occupancies, but in B occupancies as well. So just consider how that affects this. Note that the comment with a closet is interesting too. If this triggers a code that costs people money, you simply don't put the closet in, right? So consider the intended and unintended consequences of making this consistent within the codes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other testimony in support of this proposal? Any testimony in opposition of this proposal? Testimony from the public in opposition. John? John?
I'm just curious, John Wojcicki with Denver Fire. I'm curious about the inclusion of the sole discretion of the building official in the IFC. Typically, the IFC is under the sole discretion of the fire code official.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wishing to speak in opposition? All right, before we go to the committee, I will let you know that the discussion at the IBC hearing was around 2 things. The 2 things brought up by the public, one with a closet. One of them said that if it has a closet, that makes it's habitable space with a closet, that makes it all of a sudden a sleeping room because it's intended to be used for sleeping purposes and habitable space with a closet. One is it doesn't make too many things a sleeping room. And then 2, on the reverse of that, what if it doesn't have a closet? There are a lot of spaces that they do a bureau, or they bring in something after the fact to act as the closet, and now you can't regulate it as a sleeping room because it doesn't have a built-in closet. That was 2 things. And then the other was the concern about the discretion of the building official. Even though it was in the IBC, they were just like, wait a minute, I'm going to have to review every single thing. And if somebody doesn't like it, they're always going to come to the building official. Not everybody likes at the discretion of the building official in the code. So those are the things that were said at the IBC hearing. I will bring it now to the committee for discussion and concerns. First, Glenn, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to, so the someone made the statement about how this applies to your I occupancy patient sleeping rooms. And in a quick search of the IFC, that does come up about twice, where it refers to a patient sleeping room. And then that closet could become something of question.
Thank you. All right, committee, any discussion, concerns before Craig Johnson?
Sorry, I just had to take the mute off there. Yeah, I had the same concern about the closet part of that. There are several buildings that have these wellness rooms that people sleep in them. You know, or we have nursing areas where the mothers will be sleeping in those areas now. So does this include these?
That would be at the discretion, I guess, of the building official.
It goes back to the building part of it. So overall, this is considered, you have to have a closet in it to consider it a sleeping or a sleeping room unless noted by the building official.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Jacqueline.
I just had a question, or I guess a little bit of a concern, just because, and I'm not familiar with this aspect of the code as much as some of the other aspects, but there is a definition for a sleeping unit. I just want to make sure this wouldn't conflict with that definition. I know it's very specific in the code where it says sleeping unit or sleeping room, but not to kind of have two overlapping definitions that are similar.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe someone more familiar with the sleeping unit can clarify that.
There is definitely, there's sleeping unit, sleeping area, sleeping room. There's all kinds of of those. We did a search on it a while back. Like each one of those terms is used over 20 times, and so the sleeping unit is defined. The sleeping area maybe not defined. Sleeping room is only defined in Denver's amendments. Glenn, did you want to speak to the difference?
Yeah, so that did come up in discussion, and a sleeping unit is really more related to clarifying that it's different than a dwelling unit in that it doesn't contain both cooking and sleeping, only one or the other. So that term is heavily used in like your dormitories and things like that nature. It also has a connection to accessibility requirements. This is definitely intended in the IRC. It starts in the IRC because it's really about the question of what rooms are sleeping rooms. And this often stems from the issue of basement finishes where you can't get full compliance with sleeping room requirements. And so folks utilize other terms for those rooms. That's the nature of it being in the IRC. If there was concern with how this could apply to I occupancies in the IFC, one consideration could be clarifying the definition in the IFC version that it is only in reference to your R occupancies.
Right, George.
Not to use too much of a pun, but this seems that we ought to leave this sleeping dog lie. It's not defined. It doesn't need to be defined, and it has a lot of unintended consequences when you do define it in the IFC world because of the amount of what we have to do as far as react to it, as far as the alarm world and other elements. And so putting this as a definition when there has been no definition before seems to be unintended consequences. And so I certainly would be in opposition to this.
Okay, thank you. Tony?
I'd have to agree with George, and just for clarity for everybody, the big impact is section 1031 that drives rescue openings and windows. I think the code, this has been a long time argument in the city of Denver, but I think today's modern IFC in 1031 addresses the issue. Pretty much says if you have basements and R2s, R3s, or R4 occupancies, you're dictated to have rescue windows installed. So whether you're sleeping down there or not, you're already forced to install them. Now, if you have additional sleeping rooms, there may be additional requirements. So I don't think this this proposal necessarily buys us anything relative to what's already in the code today. So I'd be opposed to adding code language. It's not necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go to the attendees to rebut. We're in rebuttal. You can only talk about what you have heard. If you're in support of this adding sleeping room definition and you would like to rebut anything you've heard, now's your time. Support, rebuttal. Rebuttal in opposition to something that you have heard regarding the sleeping room. Rebuttal in opposition to this proposal. Seeing none. All right, committee, I'm going to bring it to you for a motion. Stephen?
Motion for disapproval as submitted based on the committee's previous discussion and the action of the IBC committee.
I'll
Thank
second
you.
that.
George is a second. All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second for disapproval of item number 57 for the sleeping room definition. Is there any discussion? All right, with that, I would call for the vote. All those in favor of disapproval, I know it's kind of in favor of disapproval. Raise your hand. I just have one, not so 13 in favor of disapproval. Let me lower your hands. All those in opposition to disapproval? What happened to vote? And all those abstaining? Did we lose somebody? We was you. Russell, did you not vote?
You're muted, Russell.
You voted. Is that in favor of disapproval or in opposition? Not raised hand.
It is an opposition.
In
I mean,
opposition.
it is to disapprove. I'm sorry.
Okay, it gets confusing when we get a disapproval. In favor of disapproval. All right, so we have disapproval at a vote of 14-0 with 0 abstain. All right, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate moving through that one. Now we're going to call to the floor item number 74. And you guys need to keep me honest on the time because I don't look at my clock. All right. And I have 3 of them right here. All right, item number 74. Tony, this should be your proposal.
Tony Carl, representing Denver Fire Department, modifying section 307.4.2 regarding recreational fires. And it reads, the proposal is to read, when permitted by Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, recreational fires should not be conducted within 25 feet of a structure or combustible material. Conditions that could cause a fire to spread within 25 feet of a structure shall be eliminated prior to ignition. And so typically we've used fire companies throughout the city to mitigate backyard fires, single family homes primarily. And this has been really taxing in current years to the fire department and the number of runs. And so to some extent, we want to defer to DPHE, who now has inspectors that patrol different areas of the city and are more suited to regulate this from an environmental air topic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. All right, I will take that to the public and ask if there is any testimony in support. Anybody wishing to be heard in supporting this proposal? Testimony in support. Testimony in opposition. Testimony in opposition. All right, committee, I'm going to bring it back to you, but first it looks like Glenn might have a comment.
I was just going to mention something in support that Tony did not, but the proposed added language prefix here, when permitted by Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, that exactly matches the current Denver amendment in section 307.4 for your non-residential fires. It starts out that same exact way and prior to making the statement of the distance. That's all.
Excellent. Thank you, Glenn. All right. Anybody wishing to be heard regarding this proposal from the committee? Stephen.
Question for Tony, and maybe it's just my brain at 4:30. When I first read it, when it's permitted by Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, recreational fires shall not be conducted, etc. So the intent reads, you can't have a fire, but can DPHE permit it? If they say, yeah, you can have a fire in the backyard closer than 25 feet to combustible material, is that okay? Because I read it as, if they're okay with it, that overrides the prohibition to do it. And maybe I'm misreading it. And I understand the intent, but
You're saying it should be like when they permit recreational fires, those fires shall not be conducted within 25 feet. Is that what?
I don't know what the right words are, but if you have health inspectors going around and enforcing this, they look in the backyard and say, yeah, that burn pit's okay, because they permitted it. But technically, if it's closer than 25 foot to a structure or combustible material, the fire code would not permit it. If anybody's reading it differently, let me know. If I could be misreading it.
Thank you. George?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more interested in the administrative part of this in the purpose of it. I understand what you're trying to do. The IFC, the base code, is very specific. This is the International Fire Code has jurisdiction over recreational fires. We don't want to have them within 25 feet and so forth. You don't disagree, but you'd like another department to enforce that. I don't know how this accomplishes that. Am I reading this right?
Tony, do you want to speak to any of that before I?
Yeah, I think the intents of whether, so you're right, the base code allows recreational fires. And then these are the specific parameters. However, in the city, it's DPHE that controls when you can and cannot have burns. So I think, we defer to them when they allow it, then these would be the parameters. But I don't think we're deferring the enforcement of the parameters, if that makes sense.
That's what I was trying to make to be clear in my mind is you're not just relegating enforcement by saying, oh, by the way, this department, you've got this now. You're basically saying if that department does approve the fire in the first place, it still has to meet or fulfill the base IFC requirements.
That's correct. And currently, from an enforcement standpoint, DPHE inspectors know about our parameters. So if they do respond to a location that's violating the parameters, they'll force the occupants to extinguish the fire. And if there's any issues, then they have fire companies respond to support their efforts.
So in a way, this is education by someone reading this particular piece in code saying, and not only is it the same as in the IFC, but it's in the addition in Denver, you have the health department involved.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
That helps. Look, can I?
Stephen.
Yep, thank you. That helps clarify it a little bit. I guess I understand that if it's a non-burn day, a red day, you can't have any open fire or anything like that. From a health standpoint, I get that, but then that doesn't override. And I guess I'm just asking specifically for that clarification. It then doesn't override that they can have the fire just because it's a non-burn day or a permissible burn day.
Anybody want to address that?
And I guess, Steve, just to clarify, it's not the intent that DPHE can override our requirements. So maybe if that's your interpretation, maybe we can reword this.
If I may.
That's implied if necessary.
Glenn?
Yeah, so going to Denver Public Health and Environment and looking up their open burning policy, the statement is simply that it's prohibited in Denver County for open burning, except where a written permit has been issued by the department. So my understanding of the intent of this proposal, and similarly how it mimics the current amendment, is simply first creating that clarifier that before you even get into the distance requirements in the IFC, you first have to make sure that you're even allowed to do this by the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment. So it's just setting out a little prefix clause saying, once you've got this approved through this department, comma, here are the IFC rules.
Thank you. Brett?
Would it add any clarity just to split those two up and just say a permit is required by DPHE period, and then recreational fire shall not be conducted within 25 feet? I don't know. It seems like the introductory clause there is what is maybe causing confusion, but.
Excellent. Some good thought there. So if there's no other comments, I would think about how you might propose a modification to that while I take it out to the public, because I do see that there is some rebuttal. I'm going to ask for rebuttal in support. If you're in support of this proposal and you want to rebut something that you have just heard, rebuttal in support. John, I don't know if you are in rebuttal in support or in opposition. Oh, you've lowered your hand, or nope, you've raised. John, are you in support or opposition? I'm just calling for support right now.
This is support rebuttal, and all
Okay.
I was going to recommend was start with recreational fires, comma, when permitted by Denver Department of Public Health and Safety, comma, shall not be conducted. That's just a rephrasing to rebut the concern about the Denver Public Health having jurisdiction over the parameters of the fire.
Gotcha. Thank you. Mr. Jelinski?
Yes, thank you. And I will support that concept of separating those two issues out. There's a little bit of, perhaps the way that it's written, or even with a comma in there, indicates that if you're within 25 feet and it's unpermitted, you're only going to be in trouble with the Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, because it said only permitted fires are regulated by the fire code this way. I like the previous discussion that simply had a declaratory sentence: fire shall be permitted by Denver Department of Public Health, period, and then continue on with the base code. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other testimony in support? Any other testimony in support? Any testimony in opposition to this proposal, either as submitted or as modified for based on what you've heard? Rebuttal in opposition? All right, committee. Let's have a motion for as submitted with the intent to modify it. It sounds like, but we'll see what happens here.
Move
George?
to, sorry, George.
I make a motion to accept with the intent to modify.
Second.
Okay,
Second.
And that second was Brad?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right.
If I were to go through with it, the next step is I like what John had to say. Basically recreational fires, comma, when permitted by the Denver Public Health and blah, 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 comma, shall not be conducted. I think that gives the exact intent of, yes, you've got these requirements, but also it's a highlighter that says, and you also have to have this permitted by the Denver Health.
Can you put it here?
No, I say I would take recreational fire, that's in italics, and move it in front.
For the sake of consistency in the entire amendment package, I would recommend the committee take a peek at the current amendment to 307.4, because the only alteration from the base code is that exact same intro phrase. And there would be a way to modify that so that you have some consistency between these sections right next to each other. So I would just recommend you modify them both for consistency.
And speaking to that, Glenn, I think the modification that John came up with is actually more clear, because it takes out the concept of whether or not Denver Health is permitting it or not.
Yep, and you could do the same thing here, saying the location for open burning, comma, when permitted by Denver Department of Public Health and Environment, comma, shall be not less. And you do it just doing it the same way, just for the professionalism and consistency of your presentation and your code amendments.
Oh boy. Okay, give me a second here. So let me pull back up this proposal and say, come on, stop being ridiculous.
Glenn, what's the section number of the other amendment you were just talking about?
Yeah, it's the parent section to this, 307.4, that starts off about the location for open burning.
Great.
It's not letting me type anything.
Is there any comment to the structure, Brad? You know, it's just, I just wanted somebody else to chime in there.
I guess my only concern is that it doesn't say you have to get a permit from DPHE. It kind of implies that when you get a permit, it has to be 25 feet. Well, okay, I'm going to choose not to get a permit so I can have it within 10 feet of my deck, you know? So I like, personally, I like things just to be, you know, explicit and clear. And so I might add just a sentence saying a permit is required for recreational fires by Denver Department of Public Health, DPHE, and just insert that before this, and then go on to say when permitted by Department of Public Health shall not be conducted within 25 feet. But that's just me. I just like to have it explicit, I guess.
No, it makes sense. I mean, you can do the same thing by changing the word when to as, but.
Well, in fear of complicating this further, if rather, you know, it may be a suggestion to place this at the very beginning of 307. 307.1 general states a person shall not kindle or maintain or authorized to be kindled or maintain any open burning unless conducted and approved in accordance with sections 307.1 through, you know, referencing the entire section. Maybe that's the simple place that you make the statement that a permit shall be required for all open burning in accordance with DPHE. That might be the highest level if you're wanting to make that straight statement that it's required. General, that seems like the most appropriate section.
Yeah, then that's good, because then the introductory clauses on both sections follow on from that. So,
well, once you do that, then you don't need to amend those other sections, because all is saying the same thing.
Exactly. You could actually eliminate your current exception to 307.4 and just make that charging statement.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad George and I came up with that.
What happens when you have a hot mic? You know, I'm not going to unmute it.
Okay, so Glenn, and it sounds like people are in agreement that we maybe change that amendment to not be about 307.4. We could actually probably, if that's the case, we might have to even take away.
You could.
Well,
That
no,
would
because
simplify.
you would still need.
The only change to that is
The-
that first clause. Otherwise, it matches the base code identically.
Exactly.
So
Okay,
you
so
could,
we
rather
could
than
do
add the
away.
clause to the other section, remove the clause from the subsection and just state it at the very first general 307.1 general.
Okay, we still need this 307.4.3, but we could get rid of 307.4 and get rid of this 307.4.2 if we just took this, or just go to, I'm going to ask you, Glenn, to write this up and submit it for the record, but I just want to make sure that we're all on board with it. For some reason, my keyboard quit working.
If you'd like, I can just quickly write this up and email it over to you, and so you guys can keep moving with the rest of the proposal.
Okay, that would be great. So then you're just going to write it up to say up here, in the base code, because you'll put an amendment in 307
and
instead of.
As requested by the committee, just make it a separate independent sentence, shall be permitted by DPHE.
In addition.
Yes.
Right.
Or say a permit shall be acquired, something to that effect.
Permit shall be acquired by CDBHE, because, but you don't want to, you just don't want it to sound like that's the only requirement. You have these other requirements in the fire code as well.
Yeah, I can wordsmith that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right.
Tony, I want to make sure that this meets your intent.
Yes.
It does. I guess the only question I have is, has anyone verified that an actual physical permit is required by DPHE? Or do they just announce red days and non-red days with no permit being issued for a recreational fire?
I am on their site right now, active, and it states under the open burning tab, open burning including solid fuel fire pits is prohibited in Denver County. It shall be unlawful for any person to engage in or allow open burning within the city except when a written permit has been issued by the department. Provided, however, that permits will not be required for fires in devices designed and used exclusively for outdoor non-commercial cooking or cooking of food for human consumption, nor for smokeless or safety flares used for the combustion of gases, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. I mean, I think your intent would still be important in that you're reminding the reader that there is another regulatory agency that first oversees this.
Okay. I think there are other sections in the codes where we say maybe that you also must go to that department for their requirements, and you kind of send a pointer to that department for their requirements. I know probably in the building code for the water department or two other departments that you guys send people to. So there might be some wording that you could pull from. All right, with that, Glenn is going to write that up right now. I would take a motion to table this to, oh boy. Well, I don't know that we can get through another proposal and hear this by the end of today. Do you want to table it to the next meeting? Maybe we should table it to the next meeting so that you can do that research to make sure that Tony's concerns are covered and that we have the proper wording.
I'll make a motion to table this to the next meeting since I started the motion.
Okay.
Second.
Awesome, thank you. All right, it's been moved and seconded to table this to the next meeting, which is on a day in the future. I imagine it's next month, but I want to just make sure. Yes, it is on No, it's this month, February 23rd. I would, if there's any discussion. If not, Glenn, your hand is raised, but I'm going to lower it unless you needed to say something. All right. All those in favor of tabling this till February 23rd, please raise your hand. And that, my friends, is a good use of tabling. Let's see, I'm missing 2 people. One person. Nope. Oh, we got them all. All right, that is a unanimous vote 14. So I'm going to table until February 23rd. All right, perfect. Let's see if we can hurry and get through the next proposal. Let me lower everybody's hands. All right. Too many things to keep track of. All right, 63. Dealing with dimensions. All right, Tony, this looks like it's yours. Item number 63.
Thank you, Shauna. Tony Carl, Denver Fire Department again. Making amendments to existing section 503.2.1. And in the essence of time, I'll just reiterate what the change is. I want to add a sentence that clarifies that alleys, service drives, drive aisles, and similar driving surfaces shall not serve as fire apparatus access roads. This has been a long used method by Denver Fire and Public Works, or DOTI nowadays, as they're known. And it just clarifies it for the user that we don't recognize those type of aisles or driving lanes for fire apparatus. So we're just codifying what we've been practicing for 30 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll take this to the public for testimony in support. Anybody wishing to speak in support of this proposal, please raise your hand. Testimony in support. Testimony in opposition of this proposal. Any testimony in opposition? Seeing none. Committee. Any discussion? Questions? None? Oh, Stephen.
I'll just add some support to Tony's submission there. Bringing this clarification to be very clear that alleys, service roads, drive aisles, etc., are not available for fire service apparatus is a good modification to this section. I mean, this question gets asked of, I'll say, every consultant that does fire apparatus, fire department access, and then have to explain why you can't get a aerial down a 16-foot alley to do anything useful. And it really clarifies it so that the question doesn't drag out through the review process, and it's right up front and clear. So I'll be speaking in support of the proposal.
Thank you, Stephen. Aaron?
Yeah, I have a question, and this is coming from, I'm a home builder and coming from the HBA, and really, I think my question relates to, I don't know how to say it right. I think of greenfield development, but green court kind of design where we've got garage access, but not necessarily a front street for buildings. And I know our members at the HBA do a lot of that design. And like I said, it typically ends up happening in greenfield sort of locations these days to get better densities. But how I believe today, when you try to do that, you're doing a PD and you're probably defining what looks like an alley as a streetway, and we're meeting, fire access code on those streets. And I guess I'm wondering how or if this amendment affects those sorts of developments.
Excellent. Anybody have some comments for that? Tony?
Yeah, Aaron, great question. Yeah, how you meet access is still prescribed by the code based on hose coverage, apparatus, staging areas and positioning,
Right,
and hose lengths. So typically, like Steve was saying, alleys in Denver, are traditionally 14 or 16 feet wide. The fire code requires for new streets to have a 20-foot unobstructed width.
right.
So if you have a 16-foot alley and you have service vehicles parked there, whether they're making deliveries or picking up trash, it's likely that that doesn't meet the required width requirements and is not ever maintained in an unobstructed fashion.
Right. And we've done my company has done infill development on existing, city alleys. And I think I guess I'm not concerned about that. We understand that we need to be accessible from whatever street we're near or on. And I think if you're developing something in Green Valley Ranch or in Stapleton, which is pretty much done, but those sorts of locations, when they do these designs, we're just meeting street standards in what looks like an alley. I think that's how we're doing that.
Yeah, and it's certainly getting more complicated. We do have, like you said, there's a 60-acre development in Green Valley Ranch that will have no public streets, and there's only going to be pedestrian ways and bikeways.
Right.
So we're working with them to have strategic bikeways designated as our fire apparatus access routes.
Okay. Yeah. And I think, clarifying that an existing city alley, in particular 18-foot alley, isn't an access makes sense. I just want to understand how that impacts things like that development in Green Valley Ranch.
All right, Jacqueline?
I was just going to add, usually from like a Denver water perspective, when we're looking at these plans, usually I think they're defined more as like private roads than alleys. And if it is defined as a private alley, we would not allow a main down that alley. So usually when we're working with the developers, they, meet the requirements for a private road so that they can have the main in the same, area that there would be a fire hydrant or any other fire services. But that's usually how the developers get around. They change it to a private road and then meet. There are always the exceptions, as Aaron brought on with the greenways and stuff, but that's how I've seen it done in the past, looking at site plans.
Excellent. Any other discussion? All right, I have to take it back to the public for any rebuttal and support. Rebuttal and support. Rebuttal and opposition. Rebuttal and opposition. All right. Committee, a motion. George.
Motion to accept as written.
All right, is there a second? Michael?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve as submitted item number 63. Is there any discussion? All right. Seeing no, well, Russell, do you have some discussion? Or you're just ready to vote? Okay, all right, seeing no discussion, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor of as submitted for item number 63, please raise your hand. just missing one, it looks like. Nope, there it is. All right. Item number 63 has approved as submitted with a vote of 14-0 with 0 abstentions. All right, that brings us to item number 75. I just don't know that we have time. I'm going to go ahead and pull it up to see what it is, to see if you think y'all have time. But, well, maybe. What do you think? What do you think here, Tony?
I'll make it quick.
All right, make it quick.
Okay, so what's prompted this change? So it's Tony again with Denver Fire, amending existing section 503.2.4 and its turning radii on fire apparatus access roads. So with the mayor's launch of a Vision Zero initiative to reduce pedestrian and bicyclist fatalities within the city, which by the way, we had 74 fatalities last year. The mayor's triggered the initiative 5 years ago, so we're building many bikeways and modifying many of the most hazardous intersections in the city. There's certain strategic treatments that Dottie is using to accomplish that may not necessarily meet the strict letter of our 25, 50-foot requirements for inside and outside turning radii. So we're adding a section that would give the fire code official the authority to acknowledge and approve some of these Dottie efforts at strategic locations to meet the Vision Zero program initiative requirements. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go to the public. Is there any testimony in support of this proposal? Testimony in support. Testimony in opposition? Any opposition? Seeing none. Committee, any discussion, concerns, questions? Stephen.
Sorry, Tony, I just gotta ask. I understand the initiative and the language as approved by the fire official. The question I have is, can this provision be utilized in other locations in the city that aren't approved or designated by Doty or the mayor's office for altered fire department access? I mean, I get it that, you know, on a busy street or something like that, you're modifying it, the fire apparatus access requirement. But if I had a development that pedestrians weren't getting hit and I wanted to use the same thing, I couldn't utilize that?
You're absolutely right. The way it reads, it could be utilized by them. So are you implying maybe we want to restrict it to right-of-way city owned?
You know, I don't know. I guess my observation is you'll be opening up the floodgate for developers, buildings, you know, that said, well, I don't have to meet the 25, 50-foot turning radius on street X, but I need to on my development. Tony, you approved it on this one, but not on that one. It really opens you up to a lot of subjective decision making, and it's probably more of an observation and a concern. It doesn't have specific language like that this would be allowed to occur on a street with on Federal Boulevard, 26th and Federal. I mean, that would make sense, but somebody's going to want to use it out in Green Valley Ranch, and you're going to have to say, well, no, I need the fire apparatus access in Green Valley Ranch, but I can modify it at 26th and Federal. And so I don't know how. I guess it's more a question on how you're going to address that subjectivity, or is it identified by the mayor's office of where these locations are and you're allowed to make the modification?
Yeah, you bring up a great point, and I wonder if maybe we should be more specific and just say, or is approved for Vision Zero program initiatives.
And I guess I don't know if it's appropriate to make a motion, Shauna, to table it, but I have a similar concern to several of the amendments behind this, like with respect to, bike paths and, some of those other kinds of things that are in the next couple provisions that I just think need to be talked through a little bit. So as we close in on 5 o'clock, I'm at the pleasure of the committee, but I'd make a motion to table it so we give it enough time to discuss it.
That's fine. There's a motion on the table to table this item to the next scheduled meeting on February 23rd. I have to be date certain on the table. Is there a second?
Second it.
Okay, okay. So let's have some discussion. It's been motioned and second for tabling to the next meeting, just so that we have more time to get through it and maybe cover some of these items, unintended consequences. Any discussion?
Who made the second motion?
Oh, Greg, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Correct.
So what my question to the group is who's going to work on that new language, or are you going to be able to come to the next, all of you be able to come to the next meeting with an idea or something, or is this something that a few of you will work on with Tony and maybe Glenn? I just want to know what to expect so that we are ready to go at next meeting.
We need to
George?
define new language. I don't know that we need to define new language yet. I think Steve is right. I think this opens up the discussion. It can be as simple as, the chief, both chiefs can say, hey, I've got this and I'll take all comers, but it may be a little bit more focused than that. I just think that Steve's right. He needs to have a discussion.
Okay, we just need to have more discussion. It might not need an amendment. It just
Correct,
needs
that was
more
my
discussion.
intent.
Okay,
I just didn't want to try to take action on it in less than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because there are other amendments that need the same discussion.
perfect, excellent. Is there a policy surrounding Dottie's Vision Zero program? Just thinking like, oh, remember the proposal where you said per that policy? If that was something, then you could also.
Yeah, there is not.
Okay. All right. All right, well, this is good. I think this is a good place to stop. We have, we got through 9, we tabled 2. I think that's this is my 3rd cycle with this committee, and I think we're doing amazing. So, awesome. All right, I would say the motion on the floor is to table it to February 23rd. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, and that is a unanimous decision. So this is tabled just so that we can have further discussion for February 23rd, 14-0. Excellent. Well, I just appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. We have this routine down, so hopefully you'll be able to come in, and we'll start the next meeting with those first 2 items that we tabled, and then we'll pick up at item number 39 after that. So that's how that will work. And I will stay on the line for a few minutes. If anybody would like to give any comments on how things are going, what you would see different, if things are going okay. So if you have any comments you want to give us, let us know. If not, we'll see you guys February 23rd.
Hey, Sean, thank you.
Thank you.
As well.
Thanks a lot.
I think it's going a lot better than last time.
I think so too.
I do miss the face-to-face interaction though.
Yeah, that is hard.
Yeah, but did you want to drive in the snow today?
Well,
Brad?
maybe today is the exception, but
Just real quick, so there was some definitions for the distillery chapter. Are we just going to hear all that together at once, the distillery with the definitions?
I hope so. I haven't looked at so Glenn, I think you looks over those proposals when she submits the agenda to say, yeah, these should be heard together or not. So maybe Glenn, you have an answer to that?
Yes, Brad, I completely agree. Those would be appropriate to hear together.
Okay.
And I'll put a note of that right now as we work up the next agenda or when that comes up in the agenda, that they be married together.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.